I sat frozen on the deep freezer, my breath uneven, my mind a battlefield of thoughts. The air between us had thickened with something unspoken, something dangerous. Father Chike's piercing blue eyes burned into mine, his expression unreadable, half predatory, half conflicted. A single thought screamed in my head. This is a priest, a man of God. Yet, the man before me was no longer the revered figure from Sunday sermons. It was something else, a man stripped of holy restraint, unchained from the sanctity of his calling. His fingers twitched at his sides, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths, as if fighting an invincible war within himself. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the deafening silence in the house. My mother was still at church. No one would hear, no one would know, but I would. I finally found my voice, though it came out weaker than intended. Father, this isn't right. His jaw clenched. I know. His voice was hoarse, strained. But you. He stopped himself, as if biting back words too damning to say aloud. I slid off the freezer, my legs trembling as I backed away. I expected him to grab me again, to drag me back into that moment of sinful hunger. But he didn't. He stood still, fists clenched, the weight of his position pressing down on him. I should go, I whispered. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. Yes, you should. The tension in the room was unbearable as I turned towards the door. My heart pounded so hard I feared he could hear it. My fingers trembled as they reached for the handle. Then, just as I twisted the knob, his voice cut through the silence. This isn't over. A shiver ran down my spine. I didn't dare turn around. Instead, I pushed open the door and stepped out, gulping in the night air like a drowning woman surfacing from the depths. I walked away, but deep inside, I knew the truth. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The night air did little cold to my burning skin. Every step away from the house felt like I was escaping something dark. Something I didn't understand, but part of me wasn't sure if I wanted to escape at all. I reached my home and locked the door behind me, pressing my back against it as I tried to steady my breathing. My heart was still racing. My thoughts tangled in confusion and something dangerously close to desire. What had just happened? What did it mean? That I had allowed it even for a second? I paced the small room, running my hands through the braids. I could still feel his touch, the way his eyes had burned into my skin. He was a priest, a man of God. Yet, behind those blue eyes was something untamed. Something that had awakened something equally wild inside me. I needed to get away. Tomorrow I would leave for school. I would throw myself into my new life, into the excitement of university, and forget that Father Chike had ever looked at me that way. Or so I thought. The next day, the journey to Nsukka was uneventful, but my mind refused to rest. Every now and then, I caught myself replaying last night's movements, the tension between us, the unspoken words hanging in the air. By the time I arrived at my off-campus lodge, I was exhausted. The room was small but cozy, just as I wanted, my own space, my own freedom. My mom had been reluctant about me staying outside the hostel. I needed this. That evening, as I was unpacking, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Have you settled in? I frowned. Who is this? I typed back. The reply came almost immediately. Father Chike. You didn't think I would forget about you, did you? My stomach twisted. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of what to say. I should have blocked this number. I should have ignored him, but I didn't. Instead, I found myself typing back, "Why are you texting me?" Seconds later, my phone rang. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" My voice was barely above a whisper. His voice came through the line, deep and composed. But there was something beneath it, something dangerous. "I told you," he said, "this isn't over." A shiver ran through me. I should have hung up, but instead I whispered, "What do you want?" There was silence on the other end and then a low chuckle. "I want to see you." I shouldn't have answered the call. Should have blocked the number, erased the memory of last night and moved on. But something in his voice, calm, deliberate, dangerous, held me captive. "You want to see me?" I whispered, gripping my phone tighter. "I do." His voice was smooth. But there was an undercurrent of command. "And you want to see me too." I swallowed hard. "That's not true." A low chuckle came through the line. "Isn't it?" I had no response. "Tomorrow," he continued, "I'll be in Nsukka for a church meeting. I'll send you an address. Be there at 7 p.m. I should have said no. I should have cut the call, but I didn't. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us before I whispered, "Okay." And just like that, I knew I had stepped into something I couldn't escape. The address he sent led me to a quiet, secluded compound at the edge of town. It wasn't a church. It wasn't even a priest's residence. The small bungalow looked too private, too secretive. Something inside me screamed it was too late. I knocked anyway. The door creaked open, revealing Father Chike standing in the dimly lit doorway. He wasn't wearing his priestly robe. Instead, he was dressed in a crisp black shirt, unbuttoned at the top, the cross around his neck barely visible against his dark skin. His blue eyes glowed under the warm light. "You came," he said with a smirk playing on his lips. I don't know why. My voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, you do." He stepped aside, inviting me in. The door clicked shut behind me. The air felt different here, thicker, charged with something I couldn't name. "I shouldn't be here," I murmured more to myself than him. "But you are." His voice was closer now, just behind me. I turned to face him, and before I could process what was happening, his hands were on my shoulders, firm yet strangely gentle. He tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his gaze. "You think this is a choice," he murmured, "but it's not." A chill ran through me. Something about his words made my stomach twist. Not in excitement, but in fear. "Father Chike." His grip tightened just slightly. Not enough to hurt, but enough to make me realize something. I wasn't in control anymore. That night marked the beginning of my undoing. Father Chike didn't ask for permission. He didn't need to. His touch was possessive, consuming, like he had been waiting for this moment far longer than he let on. There was no hesitation, no guilt, only hunger, and I let him. I let him claim me in that dimly lit room, where the air was thick with the scent of incense and something darker, something forbidding. He was relentless, his movements controlled, yet urgent, like he was feeding a beast that he had been caged for too long. I should have felt shame. I should have stopped him, but I didn't. And when it was over, when I lay there in the heavy silence, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't going to be the last time. I had just given myself to a man who wasn't meant to have me, and he had no intention of letting me go. Days turned into weeks, and before I knew it, Father Chike had become an addiction I couldn't shake. He would summon me with a simple text, and I would go, without question, without hesitation. I would sneak out of lectures, miss study sessions, lie to my roommates, anything to be with him. And every time he took more of me, it wasn't love, it wasn't even lust, it was something darker. He would whisper things into my ears, things that made my skin crawl. He had sent shivers down my spine. You belong to me now. No one else will have you. You don't need school, you only need me. At first, I thought it was just words. But then my grades started slipping. Assignments went unfinished. Lectures blurred together. Exams came and went, and I could barely recall what I had written. I was drowning and I knew it, but I couldn't stop. And neither could he. It was 3 months later when I first noticed the change. I had been feeling off, tired, nauseous, uneasy in my own skin. At first I ignored it, blaming stress, lack of sleep, anything but the truth staring me in the face. But then, the sickness worsened. And when I missed my period for the 2nd month in a row, reality hit me like a brick. I was pregnant. Panic clawed at my chest as I stared at the test strip in my shaking hands. 2 bold red lines, no doubt, no mistake. This couldn't be happening. Father Chike's voice echoed in my head. You belong to me now. What was I going to do? What was I going to do? What was he going to do? And worse, what if I could never escape him? What would I tell my mom? The church? It's a colossal shame. Where do I go from here?